Good morning, everyone. Thanks for braving the rain. Welcome to Blockchain Summit. As Paulson mentioned, I'm Mike Kimelman. I'm the founder of CryptoIQ. And I know I speak for all the organizers when I say that these next 2 days will be transformational. And I can say that with complete confidence because this summit is all about looking forward. And I know we've seen in just the past 18 months alone how transformational crypto can be. And everything points to the next few years being twice as exciting as the last 18 months or so. The goals for the next 2 days are pretty simple. We're going to learn, we're going to discuss, and hopefully we're going to build some community. Now, community sounds a little bit warm and fuzzy. I know most of you crypto types are independent entrepreneurs, and that so-called collaboration doesn't always work. But I think we don't understand how critically important it is and where we're at in the entire industry, that we all have to work together a little bit at this point in order to basically get a better framework and some better laws, because right now it's impeding our progress. I say all of this as someone who's been on both sides. I was a lawyer. I worked at one of the best firms on Wall Street. I started my own hedge fund in New York City, and I've seen the incredible growth and prosperity that could happen when law and finance work together in harmony. And I've also seen the flip side and seen what happened when laws get passed in an ad hoc manner and implemented during times of crisis or to score political points. And I'm here to frame that experience in a very important manner and say both some words of encouragement, but also some words of caution, that as an industry, we're at a crossroads. We're really at a binary either-or type of place. Either we get this right from a regulatory point of view and implement some sensible regulation that helps grow this business, or there's a very good chance we end up like the Venezuelan economy or the Soviet economy and obsolete. And it really is that stark of a difference. Either we're going to embrace this new industry and foster a culture that's ripe for disruption and innovation and really creates a playing field where the people in this room are magnified 100 times, or people are just going to leave and go somewhere else. And so I'd like to very briefly frame some of the conversations that we'll be having at this summit with 3 points. First, crypto and decentralization are changing everything. I think most of you know that. And by everything, I mean everything. Logistics, trade shipping, security settlement, data management, you name it. Second, the skeptics are constantly being proved wrong and ignorant, and they're boisterous about it, which is great for us early adopters. As a contrarian investor, I love that. I still get treated with laughter at Wall Street idea dinners when I say Bitcoin is my single best investment idea. Now, that laughter dies down a little bit when I say I've been buying it since the low 200s, but there's still laughter. And finally, the first 2 points really illustrate again why it's so critical that we get this right on the regulatory front. So, crypto, again, disrupting everything. But what I think isn't obvious to everybody is what's the scope of that disruption and how is it taking place? Well, I want to say that by the end of probably the next year or two, it's going to touch every facet of the economy. So the answer is really everything and everywhere. Top MBA programs like Penn, Wharton, Stanford are all scrambling to implement blockchain courses because they're in vast demand right now. And over the next 2 days, you're going to hear from some companies in this room that are going to talk about disrupting all facets of the economy, from insurance to advertising to healthcare. And that's to say nothing of the monumental disruption that's taking place right now in markets and currency. But in some ways, I think those disruptions in markets may be less interesting than some of the political and legal disruptions that are happening as well. Take the protests in Iran that happened earlier this year. I'm sure you all are familiar with, in the past, when that type of events would happen, repressive regimes like Turkey or China or whatever would literally shut off the internet to keep protests and dissidents from communicating. These days, you have decentralized companies and protocols like IPFS, which offer some of the same noted decentralization that makes Bitcoin censorship resistant for websites and internet. So literally, you can't shut down that internet anymore. And therefore, dissidents can't be silenced. And how about voting? Blockchain is something that can literally revolutionize voting overnight. If you want to eliminate voting fraud all but entirely, blockchain can more or less do that before it wakes up for breakfast. Now, I'm not saying the politicians actually want that to happen, but if they did, it could happen pretty easily. Everywhere we look, the signs of disruption are clear. So one of the questions people always have is, why is it so slow? And by slow, you have to take it in context. First of all, crypto's only been around for less than a decade. Second of all, we now live in an era where seconds and 140 characters literally define everything we do. So in the scheme of things, it hasn't been slow, it just feels slow. And you have to remember, that's happened with every great disruptive technology in history. There's a concept called infrastructure inversion, which maybe some of you are familiar with. The great sci-fi writer Arthur C. Clarke once wrote that any technology that's sufficiently advanced is going to feel like magic in the beginning. Now, he may as well have added, and magic scares people a little bit. So the concept of infrastructure inversion basically says that when a new technology comes along, until the infrastructure changes enough to adapt to that new technology, you're going to have a conflict between the old infrastructure and the new infrastructure. And then once it gets replaced, then it'll all seem seamless and easy, but that takes time. And literally every invention we've seen to date, whether it's trains, cars, internet, suffered from some of those same things. So I'll give you an example, trains. In the beginning, people said nobody's going to ride on a train. Some of the best scientists of the day actually postulated that if a train hit a certain speed, a woman's uterus would actually fall out of her body. And that was 40 miles an hour. So obviously that didn't take place. And I think most of you are old enough to remember the internet. The internet was really only for porn. That's all anybody would ever use it for. So other canards as well, I remember people saying nobody in their right mind is ever going to carry a big cell phone around with them and so on and so forth. Meanwhile, now they're glued to all of our hands 17 hours a day. So one final example is downloading music. If you're old enough to remember, downloading music was a complete pain in the ass. It was likely illegal, and it was for tech nerds only. Now, if that doesn't sound like crypto, I don't know what does. But that was before Apple and Steve Jobs, another great innovator. People are skeptical about crypto, not because it's unimportant, but it's because it's complex. But that complexity gives an opportunity to early adopters and people that are willing to do the work and look through the complexity. So would you rather, I'd ask you, be someone who's buying something like Amazon in the late 90s in the single digits when Barron's on the cover was calling them Amazon.bomb, and myself and every other person on Wall Street was mocking them? Or would you rather buy it when it's $1,000 and now dominates literally every industry it's in? So I know which one I'd rather do. But what are some other clues that people are wrong and are missing the boat here? It's pretty easy. Like my dad used to say, you got to look at what they do, not what they say. So Jamie Dimon famously said Bitcoin's a fraud. But obviously he's buying it for clients, and they're pouring resources into an internal working group at JP Morgan on blockchain. He's not the only one. Gary Cohn dismissed Bitcoin. Goldman's got a trading desk. Chairman Powell at the Fed says it's kind of silly, will never work. But the St. Louis Fed, which is one of the best research arms of all the Fed, says Bitcoin's the next logical evolution of money. So you've got to watch what they do, not what they say. And while this disruption is happening and adoption is coming, I can say in no uncertain terms it's being held back by a regulatory regime that in some ways is suffocating the growth. The lack of clarity is certainly hurting us. All of those innovations I mentioned before, all the great innovations of the last century or so, a lot of them have been created here. The epicenter's been between our shores, whether it's cars, internet, telephone, peace and prosperity, capitalism, Western values, they all took place here, which is especially frightening now because it seems like these days we're known for other things. A failed war on drugs, mass incarceration, a top-down educational system that fosters indoctrination over innovation, and a financial and tax system that acts as a wet blanket on the economy and fosters income inequality. These aren't the things we want to be known for. So why do I care? Why get up here at 9 a.m. or 9:55 a.m. and talk about something as boring as regulation? Well, first of all, I have self-interests. I have 3 young kids who live here, and I want for them a better world than I grew up in. And right now, that seems like it could be in danger. My grandparents and parents all served and fought for freedom in their own ways, and I and many of the cohorts in this room want to keep freedom and actually accelerate freedom, not only for people here, but worldwide. So we're all trying to do our own thing. But it is a tragedy that my generation, the ones after us, think this is the first time that we will actually be worse off than our parents were. And I think blockchain and crypto can go a long way towards helping those things. But again, there's so much opportunity that's passing us by. As an advisor and investor on dozens of ICOs, I can say without a doubt that the innovation coming these days from Slovenia, Singapore, Switzerland, Russia, Ukraine, Israel, all is more dedicated, bigger, faster than anything you're seeing in the States. And that's a first. That hasn't happened before. And the reason is regulatory arbitrage matters. Countries like Japan, Switzerland, Singapore are literally rolling out the red carpets for these companies and this industry. I'll give you a real-world example. I was a lawyer at a top firm, a hedge fund manager, a chartered financial analyst. I had every securities license in the book, 55, 7, 24, you name it. And there's not a chance in hell I could ever file my own taxes or have any idea what was going on. Not only that, but I just signed whatever the accountant prepared, and I'm not sure he understood it either. And I guarantee you nobody from the IRS does either. So think about that. Think about how much freer we would be if we didn't have to contend with somebody arbitrarily interpreting one line of a tax code or a criminal code or something else. I'll give you an example too. Estonia. In Estonia, you can file your taxes online in 5 minutes. And that was before they upgraded their website. Now it's 3 minutes. So what can we do? Actually, quite a bit. First, we need regulation to do what it's supposed to do, which is go after fraud and combat fraud. Real fraud. Not the stuff that gets called fraud by a prosecutor with an axe to grind. Not the stuff that's on the periphery. Real fraud, the genuine article. And then second, we need safe harbors for those who are on the cutting edge, which is where all of the innovation takes place. It should be based on fairness and flexibility, and of course, clarity. Because if people are uncertain, then they won't try new things, and if you're not trying new things, then innovation dies. A sandbox approach won't work. Our economy is too large and complex. So the existing exemptions, whether it's Reg D, CF, A+, 506, you name it, they don't contemplate an asset like crypto, and we're trying to literally fit a square peg into a round hole. If it takes 6 months and $500,000 to launch a business idea, then you've already gotten rid of 95% of the great ideas out there. Again, if you've read my book, you know I speak from experience here, but I know I'm not the only one in the room that knows those issues firsthand. And we don't have to worry as much about getting it right. We just have to do something at this point and get some clarity. Capital, whether it's financial or human, is very mobile these days, and it's going to go to where it's welcome. And right now, that's not here. So where does all this leave us? It leaves us on the frontier, I think. And I think that's where we want to be as a culture and a country. It's in our DNA, after all. We're the kids and grandparents who had that disruptive anti-establishment gene and the crazy idea to hop in crappy wooden ships and go 3,000 miles to leave Europe for the brave new world. It's the same DNA, disruptive gene that made cowboys leave a crowded, high-tax Northeast in the 1800s. Sound familiar, anyone? And go west to the frontier. Bitcoin and blockchain are literally our generation's chance to disrupt and leave the world freer than when we found it. It's brakes on the abuse of power by the state and big corporations. It's a break and a cap on the unlimited spending and printing of money, or on corporations abusing privacy or data, or seeking monopolistic or high middleman rents. Crypto assets are the first serious de-evolution of power downward, back to the people rather than upward to the state and corporations. It's the first in our lifetime, really, to have something like that happen. It gives us a chance to reclaim our DNA, to build a more transparent and less corrupt political and financial system, and all it takes is reawakening that disruptive anti-establishment gene that lives in every pilgrim, every garage engineer, and the people in this room. Thank you for your time and for attending, and I hope you get a lot of knowledge and motivation out of this summit and go forward as the next generation of disruptive innovators. Thank you.